pain. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packers, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Okay, Lions, it's no longer cute. Grossi, and today we're going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers falling to the Detroit Lions with a score of 34-31, and I have a ton of thoughts about this game because heading into this game, I had a ton of optimism for the Packers because the Packers on a nice winning streak. They've been dominating these past 2 weeks. And yes, I know the quality of the opponents hasn't been that great, but the Packers were winning decisively with a great ground game with Josh Jacobs, and Jordan Love in now 3 games in a row has not thrown an interception. So all positives. And on top of that, they were going up against a Lions defense who has been decimated by injuries. Their IR list is pages long. And so I thought if there was a time to go into Ford Field on prime time with the Packers having all this momentum, this was the time to win this football game. And unfortunately, the Packers did not do this. And I got to talk about a ton of stats and reasons why I don't think they won this football game. Starting off with the injuries on the defense, talking about the Lions. In that first half, you could not tell that the Lions defense was injured. They had a pass rush. They sacked Jordan Love very early on in that game. They didn't give them any room to breathe. For whatever reason, we kept running up the middle with Josh Jacobs, and just that was not effective whatsoever. Josh Jacobs wound up having a really nice game. He went 18 for 66 and 3 touchdowns with another hat trick. Jordan Love, even after an abysmal first half, had a great second half, 12 for 20, 206 yards, 1 touchdown, and like I said, was sacked 1 time. But that first half was frantic for the Packers. They were shut out in the first quarter, and the second quarter, they were able to score a touchdown, but it was a 10-point game heading into halftime. And then once halftime hit, this was a completely different game. The Packers came out of the gate looking hot. They scored a touchdown on their opening drive, and then got a turnover intercepting Jared Goff and scoring another touchdown, and it just wound up coming down to the team that had the ball last, which happened to be the Lions. But taking a look at some of the stats and diving a little bit deeper, there's a few reasons why the Packers lost this football game. One, taking a look at first downs. The Packers had 17 as opposed to the 27 from Detroit Lions. They only ran 45 plays compared to the 76 plays that the Lions ran, and both teams had 10 drives apiece. On top of that, in terms of evenly matched, they were both 4 for 5 in the red zone. The biggest differences were 2 things. One, time of possession. The Packers held the ball for 23 minutes and 54 seconds as opposed to 36 minutes and 6 seconds for the Lions. They won that there. And the most frustrating thing that happened over and over again tonight was the 4th down conversions by Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. They were 4 for 5. And the one stop the Packers made, it was wonderful. And the most infuriating play was that last 4th down conversion where they decided to go for it in an insanely gutsy call. And I think you can start to judge if it was gutsy or not, or crazy. But Dan Campbell decides to go for it. Jared Goff gets tripped up, still is able to hand the ball off to Montgomery, who gets the first down. And unfortunately for the Packers, they were not able to stop the Lions offense when they needed to most. I know there's a ton of talk right now, especially online, about the refs in this game. Both teams had 7 penalties apiece, which was infuriating at times for the Packers. The Packers had a touchdown wiped off the board with an offensive pass interference call on Christian Watson, and then you saw a similar play that the Lions did, and it was not called. You saw missed holding calls, especially one on Keyshawn Nixon near the end of that game that is making waves on the internet. And here's where I am about that. The Packers had multiple opportunities to win this game. The refs, they suck. The refs are not good. They've been inconsistent the entire year. They've been inconsistent for basically the entire time I've been watching football. That hasn't changed. And tonight, yes, it is very, very infuriating because anytime you talk about the refs, it takes away from the quality of the game. I think everybody can agree with that. But at the same time, Dan Campbell gave the Packers multiple opportunities to stop them, and they just did not do it effectively. And again, talking about those 4th down attempts, which they were 4 for 5, and 2 of those resulted in a score, you have really nobody to blame but that Packers defense. And it wasn't a great night for that Packers defense. Of course, didn't have Jair Alexander, didn't have Edgerrin Cooper, but in that game, Evan Williams got banged up, Javon Bullard got banged up, and it just led to a tough time. And Jared Goff was able to tear apart that secondary because 1, there wasn't much of a pass rush, and 2, our secondary is beat the hell up right now. But again, if we're using the injury excuse for the Packers, look at the Lions, who I just mentioned had everybody on IR. So just a frustrating game from this Packers defense. Talking about the Packers offensive side of the ball, Christian Watson was our top receiver, 4 for 114 yards. Jaden Reed was only targeted once tonight, which again, very infuriating. We know how much of a game breaker he can be. And taking a look at the Lions offense, Goff finished 32 for 41, over 280 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Monty, 14 for 51 and a touchdown. Gibbs, 15 for 43. Their leading receiver was J-Mo, who had 5 receptions for 80 yards. And this just seemed like a great game between two evenly matched teams. Both teams have injuries, more on the Lions side of things. And unfortunately, as I predicted in the third and fourth quarter, it just came down to the Lions getting the ball at the end, kicking a field goal with Jake Bates to win that ball game. And the Lions have unfortunately swept the Packers this year. They just clinched a playoff spot with a 12-1 record, and the Packers dropped down to 9-4 with the Seattle Seahawks coming up next on Sunday Night Football. And taking a look at where the Packers are, this is a very disappointing game to lose 100%. In terms of playoffs, I think the division is completely out of reach at this point, and now it's just about securing a wild card spot. And their last 4 opponents, 2 of them are going to be division rivals, and 2 of them are going to be in prime time. So they got the Seahawks next, then on Monday Night Football, they're going to have the Saints, and then they're going to finish off with the Vikings and the Bears. And so the Packers are going to need to win these next couple of games to punch their ticket into the postseason, and I don't think their playoff chances or implications are really at risk after this loss. It's just disappointing against a division rival, and again, I had a lot of optimism for the Packers tonight that they would be able to pull off this W, but I got to say GG's to the Lions because, like I said, that defense in that first half played really, really tough, and they just did a little bit more, wound up winning that game. Having that touchdown taken off the board was infuriating and heartbreaking, and unfortunately, it sometimes comes down to crappy officiating that is going to make the difference, but at the end of the day, I don't blame the refs for losing this football game because the Packers had multiple chances to do so. And hopefully they will get another shot at Detroit in the postseason because this was one hell of a game. And again, the offense looks so much better in the second half, especially that third quarter. They just came out rocking. The Packers need to put together 4 quarters of great play. They didn't do so tonight. And unfortunately, it came down to a game winner that they were on the wrong side of. And so because of that, the Packers fall to 9-4. The Lions go to 12-1, clinch a playoff spot. And pain, just pain. So hopefully now with 10 days rest before the next Sunday Night Football matchup, the Packers will be able to get healthy. They'll get Romeo Doubs back. Jair Alexander hopefully will come back at some point. Edgerrin Cooper as well, and we'll see what happens with our safeties as well in Bullard and Williams. But overall, a frustrating night for the Packers. Not the end of the world. We still got to make the dance, and from there, anything can happen. But I think we can all agree that defense needs to play better if they want to be a championship caliber team. And yeah, tonight, just a frustrating loss. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You know, send me at TomGrossiComedy.com or Tom Grossi Comedy, all social media, see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.